This is Platemark. My name is Ann Shafer, and I am your host. This is Platemark Series 3, featuring interviews with fabulous and wonderful people who occupy various roles in the print ecosystem. Today, I've got an artist for you straight from Latvia, Riga, Latvia, if you can believe it. His name is Reinis Gailitis, and he is an engraver. You've heard True and me refer to Reinis's work in other episodes. He's the one who redid Claude Mellan's a self-portrait starting at the tip of his nose and circling out in engraving. Reinis is delightful, and you will enjoy listening to him talk about all kinds of things, including being one of the only engravers in the entire city of Riga. It's amazing. They need some community shops over there, people. All right, let's see. Housekeeping. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. Images that Reinis and I talk about will be over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. You all know that. And also, if you could, consider how much you value the content that we put out here at Platemark and think about becoming a monthly subscriber. You can click the support and donate button over on the podcast website, platemarkpodcast.com, and decide if you want to become a monthly supporter or make a one-time donation. Your choice. All right, let us get rolling. Reinis, it is so wonderful to see you. We have been wanting to meet each other for a long time. Welcome to Platemark.
Yeah, thanks. It's an honor to be here, Ann.
I'm so glad we could do this. And you're coming to us live from Riga, Latvia, right?
Yeah, that's
crazy.
Correct. It's a small northern European country near the Baltic Sea.
Right.
Yeah, real
Can you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mr. Reinis Gailitis. I'm an engraver, printmaker. I'm 31 years old, father of 3 kids, Melody, Astrid, and John. My full-time job is international admissions officer in a med school here. So I work with the international students coming to study here in Riga. But yeah, in the evenings when the kids have been put to bed, I engrave and print. Yeah.
You seem like you must spend every extra moment you have in your studio because you are incredibly prolific in my eyes, because I feel like you're always working on something new. But 3 kids, how old are the kids?
Melody is 5, Astrid is 3, and John is 1.5 years. So quite young. We had a plan 3 before 30 sounds really good. So we did that. And yeah, now I just have to keep on working.
I had a 2 before 35 rule, but I was not even married by the time I was 30.
Yeah, we kind of did things the other way around because we thought that if we're going to wait till we have like a house, salary, all these things, we were never going to do it. So it's, having kids first and then building everything up later. But they're a good motivator to do those things.
And it'll be good when you're, 50 and they're finished with university. All your friends will be, dealing with kiddie soccer and, football and whatever.
Yeah, and fingers crossed I'll be a full-time printmaker then. They're going to be off to university and who knows, maybe I'll have more time then. But yeah, as you said, with 3 kids, every little moment where you can squeeze in some work, it's very precious. And for me, it always seems also like double-edged sword. Like every evening, I'm strict that there's like 2-3 hours before going to bed, I'll do some engraving. And those hours kind of sum up if you're doing it constantly, regularly.
So you work primarily in engraving on copper, right?
Yeah.
Which is how I found you and fell in love with your work, because I have an interest in engraving on copper.
I predominantly do copper plate engraving, but also sometimes do some wood engravings. With the copper, the material itself it's in this Goldilocks zone that it's soft enough to be hand push engraved, but hard enough that you can print, many prints from it. But I really like the technique.
The copper.
Yeah.
Is it hard to get copper? I'm not a printmaker, so I don't know. Is it hard to get it?
Depends. You can buy it in kind of artist stores, polished, perfect even, which is quite pricey, but usually in the Art Academy, we also order for students. It's like industrial copper that comes in large rolls and you buy it by meters. For myself, I usually buy like 1x1 meter sheet and then it lasts for years. Overall, engraving for me is like it's such a slow process For example, in a year, I can do maybe 3, 4, 5 engravings. So I don't have to do the cutting that often.
Right. Okay. So, well, let's go back to when you first discovered that prints were your thing.
I would say I've always been into arts. Like one of my childhood photos is when I'm standing at the wall and all the wallpaper as far as I can reach is all in drawings. Well, my parents were quite free in that regard and let us draw everywhere and so on. But regarding printmaking specifically, I used to go to a kind of drawing courses after high school, where basically we're prepared to enroll in as an architect in the university or in the art academy. So there were kind of preparations for entrance exams and so on. And there, the teacher, Mari Teklusha, she was a printmaker herself. And she said that, oh, you're very good at drawing. Maybe you would like to do printmaking. As in our art academy, there's no kind of drawing department. You can't learn just drawing, but there's a printmaking department. Drawing is kind of compulsory for everybody. It doesn't matter what you're studying. So, I enrolled in printmaking. And then during the study process, the technique basically found me. The Art Academy of Latvia is quite traditional in this way. So in the printmaking department, you go through all the printmaking techniques. You take like for a semester lino cut, for a semester etching, for a semester mezzotint, etc. And there's an elective course in copper plate engraving that I took. At that time, there's an old professor who basically gave you a burin, gave you an engraver sandbag, and go for it, try it. So I tried it. It was terrible. But then at some point, it just kind of came back to me at some moment. And then I got hooked on it and continued working on it. It's a lot of lucky coincidences, I guess, why I ended up with the copper plate engraving.
So you went all the way through university?
Yeah, I have bachelor's and master's in printmaking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's also in the Art Academy, in the printmaking department, it's kind of two branches, I would say. More of a graphic design and illustration and the printmaking techniques. So I'm more of the printmaking route. It's completely irrational overall. Art education, for example, in my opinion, I really enjoy the studies. It's super interesting in art history and things like that. But like, if you want to make money, it's really, really impractical and the irrational choice. But I don't know. I'm really happy that I chose it and found engraving.
Well, yeah, I mean, you follow your passions, right? Like you just got to go for it. I think.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating that the department was split up between graphic design, illustration, and techniques, because in between those things, nobody's teaching content or ideas, or you know what I mean? So in graphic design, it's always assignment. Somebody asks you to design a thing, right? There's a list of things you need to hit. Mm-hmm. And in techniques, you're learning a process.
Yeah. I would say overall, the education, the Art Academy of Latvia is quite technique focused, very old school in that way. And the ideas, I would say, they're kind of more secondary. Of course, teachers and professors push you to like be creative and so on, but it's kind of second base, I would say, usually.
Funny. Interesting.
Yeah. And for me, illustration really didn't like it. And in the master's, I had compulsory course that I had to take in illustration, which I absolutely despised and didn't like it, even though the teacher, Ruta Brieda, she's amazing and wonderful. And what was nice about the illustration course, that all the tasks were practical. For example, you have to make illustrations for a book, and then at the result of the semester, there's like a physical book. We used to go to the Bologna Children's Book Fair in Italy with our books. And
what?
Yeah, we used to write a project to Latvian Ministry of Culture, and they financed our trip to Italy. So
wow.
We looked at like different books from other publishers. But yeah, the course was really nice. Partially because of the teacher, Ruta. It's a reason why I could do printmaking also right now after graduation. Because usually when you graduate, she kind of remembers, there's these students who are good in these types of illustration. So she connected me with one job after graduation for illustrating Latvian alphabet of culture, which was a book with 106 illustrations, I think. And I did it full time for 2 months. But at the end of the project, I got enough money to buy a small etching press, the one that I have here. Yeah, I can print now from home for like, past 5 years since I graduated.
So wait, so you're trying to say to me that in 2 months you made more than 100 illustrations in engraving?
No, not engraving.
Oh, thank God.
But yeah, it needed to be in the style of old wood engravings.
Okay.
But yeah, because there's no need to print them like in the technique, I kind of simulated the effect on computer. So
okay.
all the illustrations were all like that. But yeah, even with that, it was a big endeavor. Yeah, basically for every single letter of Latvian alphabet, there had to be 3 illustrations plus additional illustrations. So it's, I think it was 106 total.
Oh my gosh, wow.
But yeah, at the end of the project, the book was exhibited in the UNESCO main building in Paris, France, with other different exhibition materials and things like that. But yeah, it was a cool project. Got to go to Paris with that and got an etching press.
Nice. Everybody needs an etching press. Have you ever come over to the States?
No, not yet. Maybe someday.
It's on your list.
Yeah, it's a long trip. And also with kids, traveling is difficult. I don't want to leave them alone at home, but yeah. Yeah, from my university, from my main job, I get to travel here and there to some educational fairs and representing the university. But yeah, for summary also, I have my main job in the med school as an international admissions officer. Then I engrave in the evenings when the kids are asleep. Then I also teach the copperplate engraving course in the Art Academy of Latvia once a week. So currently I have 8 or 9 students, and I have a class tomorrow morning. So I'm trying to get them infected with the engraving bug.
Is it working?
I think one student, I think last year, bought some tools afterwards and started engraving something at home. Yeah, but yeah, it's a very difficult technique. Not many people pick it up. As my friend Ezra Heller from US said it very well, that copperplate engraving is conceptually the simplest technique, as you're basically just drawing, making black line, but technically the most difficult one. So it's kind of on the both ends of the spectrum.
Oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. You're right. Yeah, I don't think people pick it up lightly, or after they've tried it once or twice, they're like, no way in hell am I doing this.
Yeah, for my students, basically the goal is that at the end of the semester they can engrave some lines. If they catch that feeling, can start controlling the tool, and that's already a big win for me. Because at the beginning there's a lot of slips and mistakes. And
can you describe what happens? Because I think I always tell people I'm a lover of engraving, but I'm not sure that we've ever really sort of gone through the motions. Like, how do you manage to control it?
It's going to be difficult for the listeners to maybe get a hang of it, but how it basically works, there's the burin, the engraving tool, and the plate. And what students usually do, they start engraving very steeply, and the burin just like digs in and they can't push it forward. So you have to like put it down that it kind of connects and then start pushing, and at some angle you just start feeling that it starts gliding along the plate and curling this burr in front of the graver. But again, if you put it too flat against the plane, it can slip out. So you have to find this like right angle to start engraving. And once you get a feeling of it, then it goes pretty smoothly. But students usually try to put a lot of pressure in it, and then it's a struggle for them.
Yeah, so it's the pressure is the problem.
Yeah. I would say pressure and the angle how you start engraving. Yeah, once you get a hang of it, it shouldn't be a lot of force to engrave.
Well, that was my next question. Like, it's, a hater always makes it look so easy in those videos of him doing it, and he's kind of just going along doing these loop-de-loops. And I'm thinking it just can't be that easy.
It's not. It's just a lot of control and practice and getting the kind of feeling of it. You just have to feel the material, have to feel the tool. And also with the engraving, once you get a hang of it, the disadvantages of the technique sort of become advantages. How how can I explain it? Engraving is very slow, very kind of methodical, and like cutting away line by line. But because it's difficult and because there's this material resistance, also allows a lot finer things to be engraved. You can start controlling the tool in ways that you can't do with the lino cutter.
Do you have one of those multiple line engraver things?
I think I have, but they're predominantly used, I think, for wood engraving. And also for wood engraving, they're not that... It's up to artist's preference, of course, but they give a very mechanical look. And I remember when I found out the multi-line engravers, I thought, oh, I'm going to make these like perfect, even backgrounds right now. But to get them, first of all, when you engrave, to have it kind of evenly touching the plate without rocking back and forward, it's very hard. And then to make exactly same line, not rocking it, placing next to it. And again, it's very, very difficult.
So with the multiple, you would get a line that might increase or decrease in width as you're going, depending on if it's rocking?
It's basically like engraving with 6 gravers at the same time. And also you have to put a lot of force on engrave with the multi-line engraver. It's hard to have all the 6 gravers touching the plate at the same time. Usually like one side is touching the more and the other one's lifted slightly and things like that. So it's hard to get it cutting all of them at the same time.
Huh.
Yeah, multi-line engravers are difficult. For some specific uses, they're nice, but in general, quite hard to use.
Yeah, it sounds better in theory than in practice, I guess.
Yeah. It's usually, students also find multi-line engravers and like, oh yeah, I know I'm going to make these like crazy effects, but once you try it, they're not that useful.
So how do you get the even spacing between your lines? Do you mark it out and use a ruler, or are you just eyeballing it?
It depends. You can do both. You can use a ruler for like for larger areas, but you can also do it freehand. A ruler comes more useful in like large backgrounds. And also there's a tool that I haven't used, but I have. It's called half-tone rake.
What?
Half-tone rake. I think this was also used previously, but so similar like multi-line tool, but instead of engraving, you're pulling it, and also kind of make parallel lines like that for backgrounds.
Is it like a roulette sort of a thing?
Not really. I'll quickly show you again for watchers. Not gonna be.
Oh, that's okay. We'll have you take pictures of everything. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's not going to be in focus, but basically...
It won't focus on it.
Like a multi-line engraver.
Huh.
It's very fine. Yeah, I'll take photos of it.
Yeah, you can't even see... Oh, I see. Okay. So are there sort of teeth? There's a rake on one end. I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's on both sides. Yeah, different lines per inch, I would say. Different...
Yeah.
One is finer, one's not that fine.
So sometimes you need some tone. Do you aqua tint with spray paint? How do you get tone in your prints?
For copper plate engraving, everything is linear. All the effects you're achieving by lines. And what I found by looking at a lot of old engravings, that for backgrounds, there's like this really, really fine gray line. So for a long time, I was trying to achieve this line effect. So basically what I found at the end is that it is not engraved, but it's basically a dry point in the copper plate that has been sanded off. So it's not really engraved and not really dry point. It's a very shallow line in the plate, but without the dry point burr. Yeah, basically prints as a very fine gray line without, this kind of soft edge.
Huh.
Yeah, I have printed some sample engravings where the stages of a line is depicted in the engraving process. So I'll show that to better illustrate it. But yeah, in old engravings, a lot of the times you can see this difference between foregrounds and backgrounds. And it's clearly distinct, which has been this, somebody has to coin a term for that type of line that is not a dry point, that is not engraved. But for backgrounds or foregrounds, it's clearly visible what has been engraved and what has been sort of scratched.
Right. I mean, scratched is really basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it is dry point. If you're pulling a point, even if you've burnished off or scraped off the burr, right? I mean, it is still dry point, really, technically.
Yeah, I guess so. Just doesn't really look like a dry point.
Well, right. But some artists like to use it without the burr, I think. I mean, I feel like if somebody took me to task on that once, and I was like, what do you mean? You're purposely scraping off the burr? He's like, yeah.
Yeah. So that's partially what I'm also doing with engraving is that sort of visual archaeology, I guess. I look at old engravings and try to reverse engineer and try to achieve these different effects with different success rates. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes not. But yeah, it's sort of like putting out a hypothesis, how it might have been done, and then recreating it.
Right. At the Baltimore Museum, we had a couple of examples of engravings where you could see an early state and you could make out that they had done an etching line design and then come in and engraved around it and sort of had laid it in with an etching, which I thought was interesting, like maybe Richard Earlham or somebody like that.
I guess that again depends on the century. If etching was invented, then probably yes. If it's earlier than that, then it's something.
Well, of course.
Yeah. But yeah, at some point, they were like combining them and doing these things.
Right. So who would be among your favorite engravers of olden times?
It's a difficult question because I'm not really looking at particular engravers. I'm looking at particular engravings that I like. So I would usually scroll through the museum catalogs and just save the things that I like or where I find something particularly interesting. So I have galleries on my computer with different sorts of engravings, but I don't really know who's engravers of all of them. Goltzius, for sure, is one of them. Sure. Like I think Hans Muller or something like that. Basically, for me, my favorite time period, I would say, is this 17th century, late 17th century engravings, because that's something where I can look at and, if I would try really, really hard, I could manage to maybe come close to that. And I think with some engravings, I am approaching that level sometimes, but in later centuries where it becomes very mechanical and basically humans become printing machines and engraving from morning till evening, that time period is not that interesting to me because I can't see myself doing that. At least not now. It just seems humanly impossible to get such a fine fidelity. But these late 17th century engravings, those are my bread and butter. I really like those.
Yeah, no, I like the Mannerist engravings myself. Muller and all those guys, they're so good.
Yeah.
But when it gets to the later periods of the reproductive engraving and everything gets so fine as to look photographic, and I mean, even then, if you zero in on just like a, coin size area, I can still get blown away by the patterns and how they managed to make flesh look like flesh with, just line. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, they're technically very impressive. I agree. I have many books also with these even 18th, 19th century engravings where it was more of a stylistic choice, not kind of from production cause, but we're going to choose engraving for this book because it's just so beautiful. And they're incredibly, incredibly fine. I agree. You can also, that's one of the things with engraving. You can put the same amount of work in like A4 size copper plate and the postal stamp size. The amount of work and the lines engraved can be the same. There's an old Estonian engraver who lives in Tallinn called Lembit Lõhmus. It's a reproductive engraver, mostly engraves ex libris, but the detail and the fidelity of his engravings is crazy. Estonia is a neighboring country to Latvia. I really want to visit him, but it's always quite difficult. But I could learn a lot of things from him. Even though the technical visual thing is not that appealing to me, but the craftsmanship, there could be a lot to learn from him. I also learned already some things just by looking at his engravings, and we've been kind of pen pals, I think. Yeah, with him, and he's given me different tips of how to engrave and how to do things. For example, one of the things that I asked him is that I've seen photos of him with his copper plates, and the copper plates look like they're inked, but they're not really inked. Basically, when engraving, he's rubbing something into the lines to better see what he's working on. And the recipe was beeswax, lamb fat, and black pigment, I think. So I also tried to cook the same paste for myself, and it works really well. It's not abrasive. I used to use polishing paste before, but then I basically, as I was polishing the lines and getting this kind of dirt and muck in the lines to better see what I'm doing, at the same time I was removing and polishing the lines. But yeah, this paste works very well. Plus, because it's oily and kind of resiny, it also creates sort of a protective layer on the copper plate, so it doesn't oxidize.
It's going in the line, so you see where your lines are. But do you transfer an image onto the copper before you start? Like, I don't know, carbon something? How do you do that?
Yeah. My professor used like a very weird way when he taught me how to transfer the things, but I actually learned how to transfer image onto the copper plate by Andrew Raftery's video. He has like a short video on YouTube about copper plate engraving, and there he shows how he transfers the image using a beeswax. So I use the same kind of method when I transfer my images into the copper plate. How it basically works, copper is very kind of polished and shiny, and you can't really draw on it or can't do anything. You can with markers, but with older mediums like graphite or pencil, you can't draw on mirror, basically. So what you do is that you heat up the copper plate and melt a thin layer of beeswax onto the copper plate. Then you let the beeswax dry, and you take a pencil drawing, lay it on top of the copper plate, and then burnish it from the other side, and the wax kind of captures the graphite particles.
Oh, you don't have to retrace it or anything.
You have to retrace it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it doesn't leave a permanent mark on the copper plate. If you would start engraving, you could rub it off. So you have to retrace everything with the dry point.
Okay.
That's what you also see in old engravings with these process prints, that there's these gray outlines and then engraving that's done on top.
Right.
Yeah, but the process is super nice. I really like it. Whole house smells like beeswax when you're melting it. And but sometimes for students, it's also the method that you can transfer images onto lino cuts by acetone print. So you just take laser print and transfer it onto the copper plate or lino or something. That also works for copper.
Can you just smudge off the toner ink?
No, you can't really.
No?
Yeah. Yeah, you take a laser image, then you take like a strong paint solvent like acetone, and with a wet rag with acetone or some paint solvent, rub it from the other side of the laser print. And then what it does, it basically melts the laser toner and it kind of sticks onto the copper plate.
Oh, okay.
But that's kind of quite harmful way how to transfer images. Yeah, I still print with oil-based things, but I changed the solvent. I used to use turpentine for solving things, and then Ad, who was a visitor on your podcast, said that, Reinis, what are you doing? Turpentine is neurotoxin, it's melting your brain cells. Use vegetable oil and vegetable-based solvents. So I switched to that. And it's way nicer, actually, than using harmful solvents like turpentine.
It works just as well?
Yeah, it works just as well. Maybe not as quick. And afterwards, you have to rinse the plate under water with some dish soap to remove any kind of oily residue. Yeah, but it works very well.
I have a lot of questions.
That's great.
And one of them has to do with how did you, well, I'm thinking of your self-portrait with your phone that's after Claude Mellan's The Sudarium of Veronica. So, like, how did you even approach it? A, how did you get the idea? And two, how did you approach, did you draw the whole thing, or did you just sort of how did you do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I don't consider myself really an artist. I'm more of a craftsman. For me, the technical aspect is always also more important than the idea. I know it may be wrong and it should be vice versa, etc. But for me, engraving is the part that I like the most about the process. And thinking of what to engrave. It's like, I just want to get faster through that process and start engraving. Also, printing is something that's, I really don't like printing. But engraving, that's the thing that kind of eases my soul and that I like the most. And how I get to that, I would say with a lot of engravings, it's sort of smoke and mirrors and illusions, and it's like magician's trick. And for me also, the more I learn, the more I do it. I don't know, it might ruin the magic of engraving for somebody to know how they did all these things. But also Claude Mellan's engraving, yeah, when you look at it, you just, he must have started from the nose and started engraving it like that, yeah. But it's a lot of planning to do that. You can't really just start engraving from the nose. So first of all, you have to, with very shallow dry point lines, kind of transfer everything in and then start working on the spiral. But also from what I observed in the engraving and in my experience, that everything is kind of traced in and drawn, all that spiral, everything in advance, and then you just go on top of it and engrave. It's everything is very methodically done beforehand.
But even after you have the spiral scraped in, do you do like one section and then later on you connect to the next arc of a line, or do you actually go from the nose all the way out?
It's not going from nose all the way out. If you place like a compass on the middle of the nose, you can see the places where it aligns with the compass and where it's not. That's usually the counter argument with the engraving, that, oh yeah, Claude Mellan couldn't possibly use a compass because there's these lines that kind of bend to the shape of the face and things like that, but they're only in some areas. So if you would take a compass, you would see that here it's the compass, and then it kind of turns to this, and then it again kind of aligns with the compass.
Oh.
So he has like made these points in like specific places and then connected them with these kind of curving lines that kind of meld to the face. So
he's connecting the dots.
Yeah. Connecting the dots between the... And he kind of moves those lines where the compass would align also around. So then it's here, then it's like there, then somewhere there, to kind of break this illusion that a compass would have been used. I would say my attempt at it, it's far from perfect, but I know that next time if I ever attempt it again, then I could do a lot better job. But yeah, I think that print was terrible. It was, I think, like 6 months of engraving, something like that. And I think like a month just thinking of how to approach it and how to do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know you don't want to share your secrets, but
No, it's not secrets. Everything is out there, publicly available. Yeah, but that is definitely an interesting project, but I'm just not willing to sink that time again into something like that. Maybe next time. And in regards to the idea, it was kind of amalgamation of two things. There's Claude Mellan's engraving of the face of the Christ, and another inspiration was the Dürer's self-portrait painting, where he holds his coat like that. And yeah, and for me, I also used the Dürer's hand, but instead it was holding an iPhone. And see, I'm a self-portrait when I used to have long hair. So that's in regards to the idea. And it was actually a funny coincidence, because when I made that engraving, I was 28 years old, and Dürer was 28 years old when he made his self-portrait. So it was a funny coincidence.
I love it. I would guess, though, that you're not putting yourself forward as, I mean, Dürer was presenting himself as basically Jesus Christ, right? Like, it's a very sort of pompous move, which I don't feel that you possess. You don't have a pompous bone in that body.
No, not really.
No.
It's the portrait of myself is usually sometimes for artists, because you don't want to ask anybody to pose. That's why you make yourself.
Right.
Yeah, but my wife is also like, oh, why are you doing this? Like, nobody's gonna buy it. It's like, who the hell? It's like, it's your face. Yeah, I would say for a lot of my works, it's because I have a full-time job, I'm not kind of forced to make things that would sell, I guess. And usually just, I do what I want to do, make whatever I want to make. If somebody likes it, it's great.
That's good and bad, right? Like we want you to make art full time, but
Yeah,
we want you to make what you want.
Yeah, as my wife also says that, oh, you said that you want to make art full time, but at the same time you're kind of self-sabotaging yourself. But yeah, she's super supportive and helps me and super understanding, and yeah, big help.
Is she an artist?
No, but printmaking and is rubbing onto her. So she's has started doing some lino cuts and things like that. So I'm super happy about it. Yeah, I make a sketch and things. Yeah, the thing for her to cut, and then she really likes the cutting process, and then I help her print it. But yeah, it's rubbing a little bit onto her.
So the print that's in the frame behind you, not the bowl, but the one with the chrysanthemum, which is one that I adore. How long did that take you?
I would say like 3 months, maybe.
Okay.
4 months. It's hard to say. I don't count time when I'm doing these things, but somewhere along those lines. Because
you don't log.
That's the thing with copperplate engraving. You can't do it quickly. Just slowly, line by line, chip by chip, burr by burr, slowly building the image.
But when you put a line down, how often is it a one pass for the line? I mean, don't you have to go back in and strengthen it or deepen it or widen it?
Depends. For example, that kind of Christ-like portrait with the spiral, it was like many working and reworking and going back with the burring and darkening areas, because the Claude Mellan's print, all the tonal differences are achieved by varying the thickness of the engraved lines. So it's really a lot of proofing. You make one print, look at, okay, here it needs to be darkened, here it needs to be darkened, then you engrave it, print it again, engrave it, print it, engrave it, print it. It's also the thing with all my engravings. It's a lot of this, printing, correcting. Not really correcting, you can't really correct things, but printing, engraving. And then at some point when you look at the print and nothing looks too bad or too terrible, it's okay. They usually stop, because you can also overwork it.
Well, right. Yeah. That seems like it's a challenge for a lot of people, knowing when to stop.
Yeah. For me, it's usually like nothing jumps out, nothing bugs me too much about it. It's okay.
So do you have a set of proofs for the self-portrait?
Yeah, whole pack, like 20 something prints.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I can show you how it looks in the process, but at the beginning it looked terrible. And you just build it up.
We should do one of those, stop motion video things of all of the layers as it goes. That would be so cool.
Yeah. Looked terrible at the beginning.
Well, that's the fascinating part. People love to see the process, right? So just like you're interested in the process, so are we.
Yeah, that's one thing that I like to do with my engravings. Make some short videos, and preferably also long-form videos. I have like 2 longer videos on YouTube. Also with the Vortex and Starship engraving with the SpaceX Starship.
Oh, yeah. I like that one too. This is where I'm confused, because there are ideas in the work. It's not just, let me show you how many variations of line I can cut.
It just, those ideas sort of happen on their own. Like I'm interested in the space stuff. I'm looking what's happening in all the test flights and rockets blowing up. Super cool, super interesting. So I watch those things like, oh yeah, I'm going to engrave it. And I think it contrasts very well with the technique. I kind of sometimes imagine that my engraving is somewhere on the wall and somebody just walks past it thinking it's an old engraving and just like doesn't notice it. And then goes back the second time walking out of the flat and looks at it. It's like, oh, there's something wrong. Oh, there's like rockets and things like that. Oh, that's really cool. It's actually not old. So I like that contrast between the old and new. I think it works really well. Depicting something in that particular media that hasn't been depicted yet.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. It's what the photography people would call the punctum, that one thing that jumps out and says, wait, hold on, let me look again. What would have to happen for you to be able to do this full time?
I don't know, like selling more prints, I guess, having more time. But again, doing art is such I can't say lucrative business, but it's super risky business. It's so unstable. You have to basically not be able to sell and sustain yourself, but you have to sell with a large reserve so that you have savings for bad times. If like some economical crisis come, you have savings in the bank account. So it's not, I can't really say like, oh, if I would get 2,000 euros monthly, I could easily quit all my job. I don't know, have to have it at this kind of stable, secure position that I feel like, okay, I'm good to go now. My course mate in the art academy, Viviana Maria Stanislavka, once made this very nice comparison that overall, not only printmaking, but making art is the opposite of professional sports. So for professional athletes, you make all your living while you're young, while you're at your peak performance. And for artists, the last ones that don't give up are the ones that's going to succeed. So you're just like, you just have to wait till the rest of the graduates have stopped making art, and then you'll be okay. You'll be okay. So I don't know. I'm here for the long game. Engraving is something that I just can't live without. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe my wife's gonna be angry if I say this, but my wife sometimes says, when I say to my wife, "Oh, I love you more than anything," my wife usually always gets back to me like, "Yeah, you just say that you love printmaking more. I know that something happened to me. You could move on, but if you would lose printmaking and engraving, you wouldn't be able to live without it." Don't want to admit it, but it's sort of true with engraving. Yeah, it's really something. If I have a lot of work, if I don't get to engrave in the evenings, it's you really get depressed, and it's I don't know. With the episode with the Sue.
Oh gosh, yeah,
talked about it. When you engrave, that you lose everything around you, and so that's it. Yeah, that's
well,
really...
I was just going to ask you, what do you think about when you're doing it? Do you listen to music, or you're just...
I usually have some podcasts on and things like that. I really enjoy listening to things. But yeah, basically your mind wanders, you're at complete peace. And also for engraving, it takes a lot of focus at the same time. If you're worried or something, you have some stress inside, also the tool can slip, you can make some mistakes. So you have to be kind of zoned in on that. For example, when watching the old engravings, I really like looking for mistakes. Notice somewhere that there's like a slip somewhere, then I imagine what happened with the engraver. Maybe he was engraving, then a cat jumped on the table or something, startled him. But there's several things that I love with engraving. One is this kind of zoning off, disappearing in the process. Another thing is that the learning curve, it's incredibly steep learning curve. And it's something that you can learn and get better on and better on till the day you die, and you'll never be excellent at it. There's always something that you can improve on, make better lines, tighter lines, more detailed engravings, etc. There's this quote from Hokusai. I think that kind of summarizes it also. The one, I'm paraphrasing, that all my work till 50 is useless, then at the 70 I'm gonna start making like work that I'm satisfied with. At 80 I'm finally gonna make work that I'm happy with. And that's like goes on and on and on. At 100 years, then it's gonna be my best work, and with every stroke of my brush I'm gonna be able to capture the essence of wind and blah 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 blah. So for me it kind of feels similar also with the engraving. That can always get better. It's something that you can practice for your whole life. Yeah, keep on working on it.
In school, were you a person who needed to get an A or 100 on everything?
No. I'd say I was a good student. Like, but not the A+ student.
I'm sure you were a good student, but I'm just thinking about my friends who were the A+ students. You know, they never were good enough. There's always something to reach for, like you're saying with engraving. And then there's those of us who are fine being an A- B+ student because it was good enough, you know? And so I just was wondering if like this reaching for the stars with engraving had anything to do with a slight perfectionism in you.
I would say it's not perfectionism. If you would look at my engravings, they're not perfectionist engravings. There's slips and spots, and plates are not perfectly inked and not perfectly wiped, and I think that's some charm of it. Yeah, there's this argument that every single print of the edition has to be exactly the same. My professor, one very old professor, he said, like, in the olden times where there was a printmaking exhibitions, you had to send 2 prints to the exhibition, and both of them had to be identical. That shows your skill as a craftsman, that you can make a proper edition. For me, every print from the edition is slightly different, and I think that's the charm of it. That's why it's handmade art, hand printed. Yeah, it's more life to it. I like all the mishaps and scratches and slips. So I would say I'm not perfectionist in that regard, but I try to do the best job that I can and try to step up every time. Kind of give some technical challenge for me. Basically,
right.
A lot of my engravings, they start with some technical challenge or some effect that I want to achieve, and then the idea follows the thing that I want to try out.
Oh boy. I think maybe me at one point in my life, thought of making prints as this thing, one thing, but the printing versus the making of the matrix is so different. Like, you would never make it as an editioning printer in a workshop.
Yeah.
Because it's just not in your wheelhouse, really. But and then there's people who have no interest in making doing the carving or whatever, and it's like there's just can be such a big divide between them. It's fascinating
because they're completely different jobs. That's why there used to be division of labor. There's the illustrator, the publisher, the printer, etc., etc., etc. Nowadays, I don't have that privilege. I have to do everything myself. Maybe if I was like recognized artist and all the works would sell before I made them, then I would definitely, one of the first things that I would do is like, take the plate and print it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I know, sometimes it's nice to print, but if I have to print a lot, one after another, it's not for me. But one of my professors gave me a very good tip about printing editions. Especially for intaglio, because it takes such a long time to print a single piece. I think for me it's like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, sometimes an hour, depending on the complexity of the engraving, is that for editioning I have like a notebook where I write, for this print I have that and that printed. So I basically have plates stashed, and if somebody orders something, I take it out, print it, put it back in the drawer. Only bad thing about that is to remember how to print that particular plate, because each of them has their own kind of, in this little spot it has to be wiped more, and maybe a little less pressure for this particular plate. And yeah, maybe at some point I'll start to have to write now the notes in the same book, how many have been printed, with how each of the plates have to be printed.
Oh, I think you should. True keeps notes like that when we're printing his plates. And also it takes at least one to get the plate sort of warmed up, and so you spend an hour doing one that's not going to be worthy of the edition, and so then if you're doing only 3 a day, you're kind of wasting paper, which is expensive, and time. It's just time.
Yeah, I try to get it right the first time. I don't use an hour. It sometimes works. I'm getting better at printing also. I'm constantly kind of learning things, how to better rub the ink in the lines. For example, I have this kind of soft leather dabber whom I really kind of thoroughly rub it in, and usually works the first time.
Yeah, we use the leather dauber thing, but it's still, and his plates are pretty massive, so it's sometimes, I don't know. And there's often a long stretch in between the time that we're doing, a Saturday 3 prints. And then a year later we'll do Saturday 3 prints.
Yeah.
But he does the same thing as you with the only making them as they're needed. I think that would be something listeners who aren't artists might be surprised by, is it's rare, I think, particularly with independent artists like yourself who are doing it yourself that you would do the whole edition at one time and have them sitting in a drawer.
Yeah, I usually have
Doesn't
a
happen.
couple of each in stock, but yeah, I usually print if necessary. Because again, copper plate engraving takes, like, for me, 3 months to make a single piece, and then I would say, like, oh, see you after another 6 months while I print the whole edition. I want to get back to the engraving process as far as
Right.
possible.
Oh, gosh, right. You have to stop production if you're, oh, boy.
Yeah.
You need
yeah.
some help.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe of approaching some students, asking for them to print some plates.
Exactly.
But, it works right now. But again, yeah, as mentioned previously, it's always like this double-edged sword. Like, what do you choose to do? I want to spend as much as time on engraving and as little posting things on Instagram or printing or doing things like that. I just want to.
But you're very good at the social media part, which I think is, I mean, that's how I found you. So you can say you're doing a good job, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're being seen, as it were. Well done on that. And your videos are fabulous, and I love following along with the progress as you're the one of you sitting in the chair doom scrolling. Or I want to ask you about printing on that blue. Oh, let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
That was so cool.
How it was printed, you mean?
Well, yeah. So, first describe the print and the image.
Yeah. So basically, there's the print where I sit right here in this chair with my phone scrolling. That's basically it. And then I wanted another version of basically the print has two versions, one in day and one in night, kind of hinting at the elapsed time that basically you've spent, like, from morning till evening just sitting at the phone, not doing anything. And then the title of the piece is Work in Progress, because in front of me is a copper plate that should be engraved, but I'm not engraving. So the work always remains in process because I'm not working on it. But yeah, that's kind of the idea of the print. And then,
okay, so then how did you manage the nighttime printing?
So for both prints, there's the same copper plate, which is the black lines. And for the night version, there's a relief print, a lino cut, kind of with the shadows, basically, with the only lights cut out. And then that's printed together with the copper plate via Scuilla.
So the blue is a sheen.
Scuilla, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. That was cool.
I was experimenting with that particular printing everything from the same plate. At the beginning, the ink would be rubbed in the lines, then the blue ink would be rolled on top, and then I thought I'm gonna take like a little cotton ball and wipe out just the lights of the print, but that didn't work out. It looked beautiful on the plate, this kind of orange color of the copper versus the blue ink. It looked fabulous. It's like basically shining from the plate, but when printed I couldn't get reliable results. It's also like weeks of trying and experimenting, and then I went with the Scuilla because it was more reliable.
Did you post some pictures with the blue ink version? Because I feel like I was watching, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's sheen. Of course, it's a Scuilla. But maybe it's because it wasn't originally.
I should post some. I think I posted somewhere on my Patreon page or in some stories maybe quickly, but I didn't make a proper post. Yeah, I should make one showing the trials and tribulations.
Yeah, so I mean, how do you keep up with all of the social? I mean, it's a hamster wheel. I want to get off. I mean, how do you keep up with it? You just remember to turn on the camera when you're doing something?
I would say you're too kind with it. I'm not really that good at it. So usually my plan is once a week I make a Patreon post for my Patreon supporters. I have a Patreon page, and then usually like once a week, twice a week, maybe I post some stories or some photos. But yeah, I'm not that good at social media things. But it's good that you said it. I like to hear that. All those things are completely different jobs. I wish I could just do engraving and not worry about anything else. But I have to do all those things nowadays. Plus, with the social media thing, it's also very tricky because you don't have to be particularly a good artist to be good at the social media things, and you can get a lot of likes and clicks and sales if you're just good at the social media stuff. So yeah.
It's I think it's a thing that's happening with this younger generation. I think artists are making things that look better online than they do in person, and those people, they seem to be happy to be buying things without ever having seen them in the flesh, and it's a whole new way of selling and buying art, and some of us are not happy. But you just have to go with it, and I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah, it's a good and a bad thing at the same time. For me,
Yes.
it's a good thing because no one could visit me, like come to Latvia to see my friends before purchasing. But of course, it's always nicer to see it in person, see how it's really like. Because in social media age, you can really cheat, take out some spots, polish some things up, boost up the contrast. Oh, it looks so nice now. But hopefully that's not the case in my works. And then when people receive it, they're even more impressed with it in person than they are seeing it online. Especially I'm of course extremely biased, but for copper plate engraving and for intaglio printing techniques, the relief of the line, this emboss, if you look at it, the engraving, the raking light, and every line drops a shadow, and it's all just so beautiful. And for me, also, I made like a little little sample engravings that I send together. If somebody purchases a print, I send them a little sample engraving together with that, because for me, one of the things that I like about copper plate engravings is just to touch them, to rub them, to feel the line. It just feels so nice. So I basically send them this little piece of paper that they can rub the line afterwards once the main work has been framed. I use it as a bookmark or something.
Right, a little fidget something.
Yeah, oh, it's just
But
so nice.
on the episode that Stijnman showed up on, he was adamant about not interfering in the image area, and I'm of course thinking to myself, oh, I rub my finger on the lines all the time.
But
I can't help it.
I guess it depends. Yeah, he was making like very kind of
Yes.
these examples with very like old engravings that have been rubbed for hundreds of years. Everybody's putting their greasy fingers and rubbing them. But I think it's the fine balance of how you do it. Because from what I've looked recently, that for example, conservators and things like that, they're not really using that much, not using gloves, for example, especially when working with paper, not because you don't have the feeling of the paper, you run more risk damaging it when wearing gloves than using bare hands, of course, washed and clean. But when we and my students during the copper plate engraving class visit the National Library of Latvia print collection, look at the old engravings, we also usually touch them a little bit.
Shh, don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the glove thing, I've worked in several print rooms in my career, and we never ever wore gloves unless it was some material that it was really necessary for. I mean, just because of that thing. And of course, we all washed our hands constantly. My hands were so dry. Yeah, we were not glove people. And I thought Ad made a good argument for no gloves on that episode. So I was glad that he explained that fully, because I've been wanting to tell that to people for a long time.
True.
Yeah. And also, I feel like, I mean, no, you shouldn't touch the surface of your prints, but I feel like engraved lines are pretty hardy. Once they're on that paper and that ink, I mean, it takes a lot to crush one of those nicely proud lines, doesn't it?
My engravings haven't been on this planet for that long to testify how long they will last, but I would say they're pretty sturdy, yeah.
I would say.
And Ad also dabbles with making his own pigments. So I have a tube of ink that was graded by Ad and sent to me, and that ink was specifically prepared for copper plate engraving, and the pigment is coarser and wipes super easy from the plate, and overall super nice to work with. And yeah, that line, because the pigment is rougher, it feels so nice to touch. It's just wonderful. I wish we could make like a huge tin with that ink, but yeah, he said like, oh, for that little tube, I grounded ink for 8 hours or something like that. It's like, be super cautious with it. Only use it on special occasions, and savoring it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh,
But that's
funny.
making pigments is also something that maybe I would like to look into more in the future. Would be interesting. But again, it's the priorities and finding times to do these things.
Sure, of course. But you've played with the beeswax thing. Do you play with other, well, you never, do you make etchings ever? Do you play with hard grounds and things?
Etchings,
Nope.
that's partially a reason why I like engravings. Maybe I'm a control freak or something, I don't know. But with etchings, lithographies, I know as a professional, you should be able to control all the aspects of the printing process. The plate should come out exactly as you intended, etc. But for me, it was always, oh, you didn't degrease the plate properly, and there's like some little spots and smudges after biting, or for litho, there's, oh, the acid was too strong and all the halftones are gone and things like that. For copper plate engraving, I really like because it's just so simple. It's you and the tool and the plate. That's it. You see immediately everything that you're engraving. You see how the line's going to look when it's going to be printed. If there's some mistakes, mishaps happening, there's nobody else to blame but you. So that's, really love engraving. Shortly. Engraving
I
and
love
wood
it.
engraving, both of those things are super nice. The good thing about wood engraving is that there's letter presses and you can quickly print, for example, the whole edition. You don't have to print everything yourself. I found a letter
Oh,
press, basically
because you don't
printmaking.
have to, because you don't have to re-ink the thing. It's an automatic
It's an
roll
automatic
of the
thing,
ink.
just put in pages. We don't
Right.
have a letterpress here in Riga, though there is one. There is one in the Art Academy and one for exhibition purposes in the National Library. But I found a printmaking place in Tartu, Estonia, again, neighboring country, but there's a printmaking museum and they have also a printmaking workshop and they have some letterpresses. So for the last wood engraving, I just sent them the block and they sent me back block with the prints. So it was super nice that I didn't have to print them myself.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, of
There's
course, there's always these like advantages, disadvantages. Maybe I'm thinking like, oh, if I would print everything myself, they would be crisper and nicer. And but you have to do trade-offs. Yeah, it saves a lot of time. It's worth it, even if there's like some smudges or some imperfections.
well, but the printers all have their own sense of professional pride. Like they don't want to send you back smudgy prints either, right?
Yeah, correct.
But it's interesting in the States. I feel like in Baltimore anyway, there must be 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 small studios that have their own letterpress, and they're all doing wedding invitations, and in addition to other art projects. But there's tons of you can turn around and hit a printer here. Like they're everywhere.
Not the thing in the EU, I would say. Maybe in Germany or in Netherlands or there,
Huh.
but at least in Latvia, there's no. I would say there's almost no printmaking culture here. Everybody is just like paintings and paintings. Printmaking is not that popular.
Weird.
Though historically there's been a lot of printmaking. I think there's like Gutenberg printing workshop and there's like books published here and things like that. But like Middle Ages and stuff. But right now, printmaking is not that popular. But I personally think printmaking is something that more people should be doing. It's so handy for selling your work, for shipping your work. It's like perfect medium.
Yes, for sure. I bought a print of yours, and it came over the seas in a tube, and there it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So good. Well, so I mean, I feel like would it make sense for you to move into a more full-time art teaching position as opposed to being in the med school
Again,
admissions end?
that's a very good question. That's something not for me to decide. That's the art academy. But also one of my silent hopes is if I get more hours in the art academy, then maybe at some point, if I get the opportunity, I would transition and do that. Because that's majority of the sort of full-time artists do, that they teach in an art academy or something in some
Exactly.
university and then do their own stuff on the side. So if I would substitute the med school part with the art academy, it would be great. Yeah, usually also in universities and art academies, you don't have to be there from 9 to 7. Usually you have your lecture, course time, class time, and
Hmm.
you can work on your things.
And possibly a sabbatical.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with the sabbatical concept, but I from what I understand, in the States that you get signed with the university for sabbaticals, that you get paid for the university but don't go to university, right?
Yeah, so if you're a full-time tenured, which means they can never fire you, basically. If you're a professor, after a certain number of years, you can apply and get a sabbatical, and sometimes it will be just a half of the year, or sometimes it's a full year. And usually you've got some project you're planning to complete or whatever. And you don't have to be at school at all. You can travel. Like Michael Barnes, who teaches in Illinois, who is on the podcast, is currently in Munich on his sabbatical semester away. He was in Norway working with a workshop there, and he's just all over the place. I think the theory is that you need to allow your professors to move forward with their own professional work so that they will attract people to the school because they are still working professionals in, on that side of the art thing. So, yeah.
That's
I have never had it.
That's one of the good things, I would say, also working in the art academy. Even if I teach one course, it kind of opens the door to also travel and teach guest lectures. So this spring I went to the Dresden Art Academy, taught a copperplate engraving course there for a week. And then prior to the COVID pandemic, I had an invitation from the University of Porto to teach a course there. But then the pandemic hit and I never got back to the people, but I should go there also at some point. That's one advantages of teaching also in the university, even if it's just like a little bit, it also opens some doors.
In the States, Andrew Raftery is kind of our top of the pile engraver person. And of course, there's other artists too. James Ellers is one who was on the podcast. And there's others, obviously. Are you it in Europe? I feel like that can't be true. No, there's all those guys in France. Eric Demazier and Jacques Muron.
You can get me in touch with those guys in France because there's not that many engravers I know in the EU.
Yeah, there seems like a pocket of them in France. Interesting.
There's one friend of mine in Italy who's engraving, then the Lembit in Estonia. But there's some here and there, but it's the least popular of the printmaking techniques, probably.
Yeah, it really suffered in that late reproduction era, I'm afraid. But, that was Hayter's whole thing, was trying to bring it back into the kind of common usage. And he did for a minute, but I don't know if it's intimidating or it takes so long to get good at it that they just give up.
I would say it's how long it takes to make a single piece. It's the least practical of the techniques, possibly. That's why majority of printmakers nowadays, it's silkscreen, lino cuts, maybe like some expressionist wood cuts, something that you can make a lot and quickly, and preferably print on everything possible, on t-shirts, bags, everything.
Right.
So copperplate engraving is the very, very other spectrum of the printmaking process. It's as slow as tedious as possible.
It's making me feel old because it's my favorite. I love it. I just find the quality of line so gorgeous, and it's just that you can't get it any other way. And I don't know.
Yeah, I would say exactly as you said it. The quality of engraved line is like nothing else. You can, with this one stroke, you can have such a dynamic line starting from very shallow, almost like hair thin line, and getting deeper and wider and darker, and then again thinner. In no other techniques you can see this kind of dynamic line. You can sort of like in a lino cut or a wood engraving, but it won't have this kind of emboss and the richness and as copperplate engraving. Yeah, for example, for etching, it's just you put it in a bath and it's going to be the same width throughout the line. And if you want it somewhere darker, then you take it out, block it, put it back in and etch it again. But you won't have this dynamic line for a single line. It's something that I would say only copperplate engraving has. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. We're on the same page here, Anne. It's wonderful.
Have you met Anton Wirth?
I think not.
Okay. There are people. We have to assemble a list of fabulous, and they're all men. What is up with that?
Yeah, yeah. All my students are I can't say. I don't know what's the correct way to say girls, women. I should say women. All my students in the Art Academy are women, and they've been doing good job at copperplate.
Okay, good.
Very good. But I think it is more physical and takes more force than lino cut or other techniques.
Right. But you can engrave into other metals, right? Or, I don't know why you would want to, but
depends on the softness of the metal.
Right.
In softer metals like gold, silver, sure thing, you can engrave freehand, no problem. But then, if the metal becomes harder, at some point you won't be able to push it with the force of your hand. In the olden days, the engraving started with engraving on armors and things like that, with the hammer and chisel engraving, where there's a graver and you hammer it forward. And nowadays, as James Hellers said on his podcast, and your podcast, about his work, is that he uses air gravers, and that's what majority of the engravers nowadays use for jewelry.
Right. Oh, the pneumatic ones. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of pneumatic hammer kind of.
Have you tried one of those?
Mm-mm.
No.
Haven't. Maybe if one day I have a lot of extra income, then I could just just gonna buy it and try it. But right now, no. Hand push engraving works for me just fine. Also, it's very fascinating because I've been in these kind of groups and Facebook pages with jewelry engravers and gun engravers. For example, for me, their work seems mind-blowing. Engraving on these curved surfaces, all this mind-blowing scroll work. For me, it's complete magic. But for them, they look at my work and say oh, you're getting all these tonal differences. So it kind of goes both ways. So it's also been very interesting communication with those guys. But they're, incredible professionals, the way they sharpen their gravers, and they're, immaculate. So that's one place where I also learned quite a lot about engraving is from jewelry engravers. That's where it has never stopped, the evolution of engraving. For printmaking, technical innovations, faster, cheaper printmaking process comes along and it substitutes the previous one. But for jewelry, it never stopped. That's something that I would like to dabble into in the future. I really like wristwatches, but I'm at the time of my life where I can't really afford things like that. But one day I would like to try engraving watch dials, finishing watch movements, polishing bridges. I think that would be a lot of fun. But maybe someday. And then I could do copperplate engraving during the day, and the evenings work on wristwatches. And we'll make
we need to run a fundraiser for you so we can bring you to the States and you can meet up with Andrew in Rhode Island, and then you can go out to Kansas and hang out with James and his pneumatic machinery and, get the whole, it'd be so cool to travel with you.
Someday. Right now it seems frightening. I don't know. It's always also some inner turmoil and battle. Would I even would like to do it full time? It's a lot of pressure and then you have to make work that actually sells and what to make. Engrave kittens and birdies and all. Because the dream is you do whatever you want and it just works. But who knows? One of my friends once said that never do the thing that you love the most for money, because then you'll hate the only thing that you love doing. So you go the other kind of way. I don't know if it's true. Maybe it's really if you do the thing that you love, then it's the saying is true that then you never work for the day in your life because you're gonna do the thing that you like doing. I don't know how it's the right way, wrong way, but I have a lot of time to figure it out.
That's right. You're a youngster. I never wanted to be anything but a curator ever, and I, for whatever frustrations one might have with the management at any company anywhere, I loved my job, And I've been able to, transfer it to this kind of a thing, which I also love to do. I would like some help with the editing and the technical parts of running a podcast, but I love connecting with people and connecting you with other people and, drawing back the curtain and saying everybody's an incredible artist, but they're just people too. We all, have our own stories. So that's where I am.
You're doing great with the podcast. It's really amazing. I really enjoy. I haven't seen. I'm honest. I haven't seen all the episodes, but I've seen a lot of them. And the one with the suit today was like amazing. She's such a nice lady. Like awesome. She would be such a nice auntie. It's like flipping middle finger to all the corporate guys. It's like it's a pleasure to listen. Yeah, sorry for jumping back and forth, but there's one thing that I also remembered that I really, really like about engraving, but it's maybe not specifically about copperplate engraving, maybe printmaking in general. I get depressed when I don't have time to do it, because especially with like office job, 9 to 7, it's very routine. Every day blends together, all the days of the week blend into one. But with copper engraving, there's this reference point. There's physical thing on my table that I see that I've done something on the day before. There's constant progress. I'm constantly working towards something, because working in the admissions office in the university, just a lot of emails, looking at educational documents, communicating, typing, but there's no physical, tangible sort of thing. It's of course, there's in-person interactions, but I personally really, really admire people who work with their hands. Doesn't matter, artist, printmaker, plumber, electrician. There's a lot of these jobs that nowadays are kind of, can't say rare, they're always going to be necessary, but they're not the most well-paid jobs. Everything is more like IT and technologies. So I really appreciate people who work with their hands, especially like carpenters. I think there's something so magical to work with your hands and leave a physical, tangible thing after yourself. Also, this reminds me, I had a discussion with one of my patrons or somebody who purchased the print. Don't remember who exactly right now, but he basically said that nowadays all the technologies and technological media and everything's on computers, on electronics, on cloud and things like that. And we haven't experienced a severe magnetic storm in a couple hundred years. When the electricity and first phones started, there was one magnetic storm that's like phones were shooting sparks out of the thing that you hold in your ear. And so we've been very lucky. But in theory, if like very severe magnetic storm hits, all the data, all the electronics gone in a single beat. So he said that in a way, you're making with the copper plate something physical that's going to be left over when everything else is gone. In theory, if you pack the copper plate in plastic in dry place, it can stay there for thousands of years. And if somebody discovers it, could pull it out, print it, and see how people were living or what the society was like, etc., etc. So that was also a very interesting thing that we talked about, leaving something permanent, physical behind you.
I totally agree with you. I like paper and I like a book, and this idea that people aren't going to publish books anymore physically. I'm like, wait, that's a mistake. Just because of your point.
But I think it's already proven wrong. Books are selling, records are selling, vinyl is selling. It kind of goes, everything is like a pendulum. It becomes more technological, more craftsy, and
Yes, indeed. Yes, there is a clear pattern of it. My last question for you is there a time at which you can foresee that it will be very difficult for you to keep doing it at the pace you are?
I would say it's not that tiring on the hand, actually. It feels very calming and soothing and easy and relaxing. I hope it's going to get only better with time and age. The one thing that is quite harmful and not that good is overall the process of sitting in the same position for extended periods of time. For example, Lembit, the engraver from Estonia, he suggested that one of the things that I should look into in the future is having a microscope for engraving. So that's also one thing to improve your posture, because when you're engraving, you're usually hunched back looking over the plate. with your neck bent and back bent for many hours. So what the microscope does is that you're looking straight and seeing the engraving below. You don't have to be hunched over. So that's one thing that can be improved. What me and my students find very fascinating, I have quite a lot of engravings from Lembit Lõhmus. He signs all his ex libris prints with his signature, and the signature is super shaky. Like his engravings are so precise, so clean, so nice, incredible. The process of engraving actually allows for very controlled lines, and this material resistance helps it. And you won't be able to draw such engraved precise lines with the freehand with a pen. You can get finer detail and more control when engraving.
It's almost like Hayter wasn't using engraving at all, because he was using it in such an odd and unusual way. And, there were obviously people who followed along behind him, but you guys have all gone back to the more constructed cross-hatching, shading sort of style and have left that kind of free, loopy stuff that he was doing in the 40s and 50s, 30s even. It's kind of fascinating that the tool kind of dictates what, obviously, this is very obvious. This tool dictates what's possible, I guess. It's almost like he was this real anomaly or something.
Generally, in copper and print engraving, it's very kind of planning out, methodical. Like I have to do this, sketch, etc. But you can, I have usually this kind of general sketch, general idea. But then when I'm engraving, the work sort of makes itself. It makes corrections itself. It kind of dictates how it wants to be made. I don't know. It's hard to say. Yeah, because when I'm making a sketch, I'm not making like cross hatchings and how it's going to look like here. It's usually like a tonal sketch. For me, the real drawing starts when I engrave, then when the real work starts, I would say.
Oh, interesting. Do you have a directory of patterns and forms that describe certain things? Like they used to have, if you did your dot and lozenge this way, it would describe ermine or velvet. Or do you have anything like that?
Yeah. Especially in olden times, there was the division of labor. It was also division of labor amongst the engravers. There's the guys who were practicing, so tailors who were engraving clothing, butchers who were engraving animals, etc. Yeah, how the foliage should be engraved and so on. For me, no, there's no patterns. I just go at it and see what happens. Sometimes I keep some old engraving samples next to me. In a way, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. If there's like breaking waves on the shore, I look at some old engravings with waves and see how they have rendered it and tackled the subject. But sometimes
Clouds,
when it's like rockets and mobile phones and something like that, there's no reference point.
I used to take, I don't know where I was, some exhibition somewhere, and I was so tired that I just started focusing on the clouds in the prints and taking pictures of how those were rendered, and it's like how you get the air and the movement and the weather. Like it's so cool to see how many ways one can describe all that stuff. Cool.
And plus, it's the thing usually also from artist to artist. There's one artist who renders it one way, another who renders it another way. Yeah, for my engravings, it's hard to say. Sometimes it feels like it's amalgamation of different styles and like looking how in one print how the tree was made, in another print how the ground was made. But I think because at the end of the day, it still goes through me. It all connects. It doesn't feel disconnected. Those parts.
Right. Yeah. Your Patreon, how many people you got in there?
I have to check. 30 maybe.
Yeah, that's great.
32. Yeah. It's a little bit of stable income from month to month. It's a good backbone. It covers the materials, the papers, the inks, things like that. And in return, they get the prints. From patron side, it's very, I would say, I hope that they receive a lot of value from it, because there are some patrons who have all their walls just with my prints.
Okay, so for listeners, Patreon is a app basically where you can start a membership level thing where you can have, however many tiers you want. And if you have like $1 tier, you might get a postcard. And if you get $5 tier, you might get, a shout out on something. And so if the more money you give on the monthly basis, the more treats you might get or access early to something or whatever. And it's a way that many artists have started being able to have a little bit of support behind them, but it's something that Reinis does very well, and you all should join.
Yeah, I don't know if I do it very well. Plus, I have limited spaces available. I think there's maybe 10 more people can join. And
is that right?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of tiers. There's three euro tier a month. I think it's almost like basically $3 tier is the first tier, which is just all the posts and blogs. So usually share the proof prints and all the trials and tribulations and all the mishaps and all the frustrations. It's not necessarily a good place, the Patreon page, but hopefully it's interesting to look at. And then I think it's $10, and you get 2 prints a year, and $dollars a month you get like all the works that I make. And then depends, sometimes it's 3, 4, 5 prints a year. And I hope it's very good sort of deal for them. But from my side, I'm extremely grateful that people put their trust in me, because they don't know what I'm gonna make next. Maybe I'm gonna do my portrait face for next 6 months, and they'll be forced to look at it developing. Plus, there's sometimes like personal issues that you're unable to work for extended periods in time. But primarily, I would say the feeling that I get from patrons is that they're not there to get stuff from you. They usually just like what you're doing and want to support you regardless of what you're doing. I haven't experienced that I decide to do like doom scrolling engraving and all of a sudden they're like, oh no, I don't want to have this one, I'm getting away from this page. They basically put a trust in me, and I'm super grateful that they're sticking with me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I looked at the Patreon thing, and its cost to me was more than I was sure I was going to recoup from the people who were giving money. But the expectation of extra content was enough for me to just say, I can't keep up with the content I'm already delivering. So to, add on to that, I just can't quite do it yet. So that's why mine is just a basic, monetary support. You like what I do, but you're not going to get more from me unless you can reach out to me anytime and I'll talk to you. But, there's nothing programmatic or anything like that, because it was more than I could handle.
Yeah. For me, basically the commitment from my side is usually that I make a post once a week, like how the print has developed and how it has changed, and show proof prints, and then making the physical prints once it's done. So that's usually a big kick into my punch. That once I finish print, and now I have to print 30 pieces and send them all over the world. So that's usually takes some time. When I'm printing them, I'm usually like, oh no, it's terrible to have to print so many, but it's really nice to send them and hear the responses from everybody. Like when I was looking at it online, it didn't seem that, I don't know, detailed, but in the person, it's like, oh, so great, so amazing. And sometimes it can help you in unexpected ways, I would say. Also, because the prints are scattered all over the world, in Canada, in Australia, etc., in US. For example, recently, one of my patrons, also friend, he lives in Zurich, and he also has basically my work wall. And he had a friend that came into his place, and then, I really like the work, and recently purchased also 8 prints. So that was super nice out of the blue. So it kind of also the analogy of the professional sport. I'm just putting more works out there, and hopefully more people see them with time.
That's right. The power of multiple prints, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about, or should we? What do you think? What do you want to tell the world? No
What do you want
pressure.
to tell the world? Buy prints. Get into
That's
printmaking.
right.
Appreciate printmaking. Because
Yeah.
printmaking has this extra layer that no other art form has. The one thing is that there's just the visual thing which you look at, and then if you know how the print is made, it's sometimes like mind-blowing, like how a person in this particular technique can achieve this effect, how a person who makes etching can make it look like, I don't know, woodcut or whatever. There's this extra layer, peeling off the layers. It's so delicious. Printmaking is so nice, so delicious. I don't know. It's amazing art form, and I'm super happy that all the things have aligned in my life, that I got to learn these things and practice these things. It's all such a coincidence, but yeah, I never regretted it for a moment. Yeah, printmaking
No,
is magic. You probably feel the same way.
I do.
Uh, Pencil drawing, painting, it's just the medium on paper or on canvas. There's not this spectrum of things. It's yeah, mind blowing. Plus people are all the time reinventing things, coming up with new things, having their own author techniques. The electroplating type etching, that was amazing. I got in touch with, sorry, I forgot the name.
Jason.
Jason, yes. I also wrote to Jason, and that's
Good.
really, like, previously you asked me about etching. Etching is super poisonous, harmful process that produces harmful fumes that can damage your lungs, etc., when you inhale it. And that process, which is basically reverse electroplating, is a way how, for example, for me who has kids at home, I could do etching, and then you don't need these like vacuum things that pull out the fumes, and you don't need specific like etching baths with covers. So yeah, there's things being innovated all the time, and that's super exciting time that we live in. We just need more people into the printmaking ecosystem that also gets kind of infected with the bug of printmaking. And yeah,
You're right.
but yeah,
Yeah.
the printmaking demands from a viewer also things. You're just not consume, but you also have to learn to get the most out of it.
I was hoping that you had listened to the episode with Jason Scuilla, because I found his story about, well, I have seen it, and I was there visiting in the early days of his research, and it was so cool, and the lines are so fine, and I think you would just be like a duck to water, as they say here in the States.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I think it would be such a great area of expansion and experimentation for you. I think it would be great. We have to go to Kansas.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking of maybe writing and applying for Jason's print research
You should.
thing, but I probably wouldn't get funding to come to the US. The topic of all the discussion, this print and environment and cycles of life. Yeah, I wrote to my friend Ezra Heller in the US, who makes his own pigments and all his research about pigments, and he collects like burnt wood and makes pigments out of them. And he already been in touch actually with Jason, and he's maybe going to be participating. So that's super cool that everybody's connected with printmaking.
Well, there must be something similar in excuse me, in the EU, but there's these conferences between MAPC, which Jason is doing, and then the Southern Graphics Council International. There's just these moments where all these people, hundreds of people are there, and everyone talks the same language, and everybody's excited about, like, it's you get so much excitement and energy from it, and you definitely need to come. We
I
should
don't
get
know
you
if
there.
such print conferences happen in Europe. I think it's, at least I haven't heard of them. Maybe in the UK, but not really, because in Europe everything's kind of localized in their own little communities, in their own little towns, cities, their own communities. I think in US everybody is the same language for all the continent,
Well,
basically.
true.
And
That is true.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
it
helps a
is.
lot.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, maybe we
Thanks,
should
Sam. That's
Wrap it up.
Sure. It was very nice to talk to you.
You
if
too.
you ever need something from me, let me know.
Thank you. Yeah, Latvia has never been on my radar in any way. I confess. I had a friend who was Estonian once. That's as close as I got. But it's great to have a connection there because I love the way you're working and I love the work itself. And I think you have a great future.
Yeah, it's overall, there's no print culture here really. It's
Oh my
if
gosh.
it wasn't for the age of internet, I don't know, I'd probably be alone making my works. Nobody would see it. But
Yeah.
that's the plus of the age of connection, I guess, or disconnection. Depends how you look at it.
Yeah, no, we definitely would not have come across you if it wasn't for the internet, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's
Where did we come across? I think I posted something on on Facebook in some printmaking forum. That's cool. Cool that these things happen.
I know.
And then it turns out there's like all these connections already, common acquaintances.
Yeah. Yes, and I feel like I have a new friend.
Yeah, for sure. As I said, I already feel like I know you, Anne. As like watching all these like podcasts. But yeah, then previously it was more like a parasocial. I felt like I know you. But yeah, right now it's official. We've met.
That's right. Yep, you can't get rid of me now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Platemark with Reinis Gailitis. He is a delight, and I'm so glad you got a chance to listen to him and get to know him. As we said at the top, any images that we talk about are over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Also, you will find the support and donate button over there. Please consider becoming a monthly subscriber. It's a lot of work, and it's really just me here doing most of it, although I do have several people to thank. One is Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. Number 2 is Dan Fury of Extension Audio for being my sound guy. Thank God for the sound guy. Number 3 and 4 is Lee Turner and Skip Barnhart, who sent me sounds from their various print shops so that I could create the soundscape at the beginning of the podcast. I think that's it. We'll see you next time.